Miss Wellman, would you open us in a word of prayer, please?
Our precious Heavenly Father, I pray, Father God, we ask your blessings upon this worship service, Lord. Just open our hearts and our minds to what you want us to know. Lord, we thank you for this our special day for mothers. We just pray, Lord, for Mother Hagerford. When they leave the family, Lord, and you will back to the family. Lord, bless the pastors and your word to us today. Please forgive us in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Happy Mother's Day, dearest ladies. Anna M. Jarvis first suggested the national observance of an annual day honoring all mothers because she had loved her own mother so dearly. At a memorial service for her mother on May 10th, 1908, Miss Jarvis gave a carnation, which was her mother's favorite flower, to each person who attended. And within the next few years, the idea of a day to honor mothers gained popularity, and Mother's Day was observed in a large number of cities. In the U.S., on May 9th, 1914, by an act of Congress, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed the second Sunday in May as Mother's Day. He established the day as a time for, quote, public expression of our love and reverence for the mothers of our country. There's a little boy who forgot his lines in a Sunday school presentation, so his mom snuck up to the front row to kind of prompt him, and she was kind of gesturing, and she was mouthing the words, but he didn't quite get it. And finally, she crept up there, and she said, I am the light of the world. And he goes, and my mother is the light of the world. We actually, the church we were at in Omaha was kind of like this. There was a mother of three very, very unruly boys, and they were kind of notorious. And somebody asked her, if you had it to do all over again, would you have children? And she didn't even miss a beat. She said, yes, but not the same ones. And this is interesting. This was actually a study done. A school teacher gave her class of second graders a lesson on magnets and what it does. And after that, the teacher picked out, she had a little questionnaire. It says, my name has 6 letters. The first one is M. I pick things up. What am I? When she got all the papers back, over half of the students wrote the word mother instead of magnet. Proverbs 31, this is labeled the capable wife, but in it are many things about the mother. Kirsten read just a brief portion of that. And I would like to read Proverbs 31, beginning at verse 10, and may the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his word. A wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still dark. She provides food for her family and portions for her servant girls. She considers a field and buys it out of her earnings. She plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for the tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and she sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the reward she has earned, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. So, mothers do so much. A study back in the late 80s suggested that if a mother was paid minimum wage for all of the tasks that she worked, combined with the hours in a day, she would make, and this was back in the mid to late 80s, she would make about $41,000 a year, which was no small amount. Actually, who am I kidding? It's still not a small amount to me. And just three things I want to touch on. Her hands work, her mouth speaks, and her heart loves. If we look at verses 13, 19, and 22, she selects wool and flax, works it with her eager hands. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. In verse 22, she makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. You can also look in 15 and 16 and just about every verse in here. In verse 15, she gets up while it is still dark, provides food for her family, portions for her servant girls. The verse before that, she's like merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She does what is necessary to provide those things for her family. There's this story about a teacher trying to teach fractions to a young boy. And she said, Billy, you ever notice how the boy's name's always Billy? She said, Billy, there are 7 of you in your house, right? There's 5 kids, there's your mom and your dad. And your mom baked a piece of pie. How many pieces would she cut it in? And he said 6. And she said 6. She said, there are 5 kids and 2 parents. I don't think you know fractions very well. He said, I know fractions, but you don't know my mother because she would say she didn't want a piece of pie. It talks about getting up while it's still dark, and her lamp does not go out at night. I've had kind of a rough week. I went to bed, well, for me it was early. I went to bed about 9:30. I think my wife was up till 11, still doing things and baking and getting ready for having some people over today. I was flat tired. She's up and going. I think my brain is still at home on the pillow. And that's one of the innate differences in the way God created men and women. Men talk about working hard and, getting up at the wee hours of the morning and going to work. Usually when a man gets up in the wee hours of the morning, his wife has already gotten up, fixed him lunch, started his coffee, made his breakfast, and gone back to bed for another hour of shut-eye before she gets the kids up and does the same thing. When we were blessed enough to have my wife stay at home and take care of our children, she did not pass the days idly. She kept herself busy doing things. And it never seemed to amaze me how when I came home, something else had been done. The house was always clean. Dinner was, if not on the table, very, very ready to be on the table. Provided I got out of work on time. And she always kept busy. She took very good care of myself and then our one child, our daughter. And I felt so blessed that my wife was able to stay at home, and so very thankful that the Lord had blessed that request for our lives. We didn't drive the newest car. I didn't have the newest clothes. And I mean, look at me. You can tell I'm not the epitome of fashion. And there were some small sacrifices we made, but so much worth it in the long run because she was able to take care of all of us and spend those very early formative years with our child. It also says, the old saying, man works from sun to sun, but woman's work is never done. Verse 27, she watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. I used to give my wife a bad time. If she had been sick, I would come home and I could say, well, it looks like you've laid around eating bonbons and watching soap operas all day. She's not big into bonbons and she can't stand soap operas. So she knew I was giving her a bad time, but she would still try to get at least a load of laundry and something done. And if she was very ill, I could tell because the house wasn't in its usual state of keep. And she said, I'm sorry, I know. I said, you are sick. I understand that. Now, when I was younger, I just left it knowing that she would feel better and get it done. And she is teaching me, though. She's getting me trained up to where I know I can help out with some of that stuff. And I even fold some of the clothes the correct way now. Little poem for you. My mama on winter's day milked the cows and fed them hay, slopped the hogs, saddled the mule, and got the children off to school. Did a washing, mopped the floors, washed the windows, and did some chores. Cooked a dish of home-dried fruit, pressed her husband's Sunday suit, swept the parlor, made the bed, baked half-dozen loaves of bread, split some firewood, lugged it in, enough to fill the kitchen bin, cleaned the lamps and put in oil, stewed some apples she thought might spoil, churned the butter, baked a cake, then exclaimed, for mercy's sake, the calves have got out of the pen, went out and chased them in again, gathered the eggs and locked the stables, returned to the house and set the table, cooked a supper that was delicious, and afterwards washed all the dishes, fed the cat, sprinkled the clothes, mended a basket full of hose, then opened the organ and began to play When You Come to the End of a Perfect Day. Only a woman would do that. There are way too many things in there for guys to complain about. I cannot believe those stinking calves. I'm going to have veal if they keep getting out. Guys are not that patient. She was apparently a godly woman who did good to her husband and her children the days of her life. Here's another interesting illustration. A grandma was over babysitting her granddaughter while mom and dad had some people over. And when it was time for the little girl to go goodnight, she says, I know what's going on downstairs. And her grandma said, really? What do you think is happening? She says, there are some very important people downstairs. And grandma said, well, how do you know that? She said, just listen. Mommy's laughing at all of Daddy's jokes. A good wife. Now, my wife doesn't laugh at all my jokes because she's still somewhat sane and in the course of 20 years has decided to humor me slightly less. But I don't try any less to make her laugh because to see her happy and to make her laugh warms my heart. Proverbs 17:22 says that a cheerful heart is good medicine. It also shows a lot of love. I am one of those, I tend to think, rare individuals who enjoy coming home to my wife and children. I have worked at places where I was the only one who was excited to be getting off work to go home and see my wife and children. And I never could understand the lack of a desire to see your beloved and your children. I think that's because we tend to do things slightly differently than a lot of the rest of the world. I'm not saying that you have to be a Christian to enjoy your wife and child, but usually it requires a selflessness that some people cannot manage to make. People have seen my wife and I together and say, oh, you guys make it look so easy. That is so sweet. It just seems so effortless. And I said, it's not. It is constant work to maintain or grow the relationship that we have together as my wife, and it also takes work on her part consistently to maintain being a mother. You can't take a day off from being a mother and expect everything to go smoothly. You can't take a day off from breathing and expect to wake up. And you're saying, well, those are kind of some strict comparisons, or maybe some very opposite comparisons, but they have very, very similar results. Mom doesn't get, rarely if ever, a day off. When she does take a day off, it's usually more work for her when she comes back. Why? Guys just aren't put together that way. The unselfishness of a mother shows a heart of love for her family. I know that all of us can remember some things that our mother has done for us that was completely and utterly selfless. I mean, most of us can remember a whole life that way. Some can remember specific times or instances. You know, mom's a taxi driver and a fashion designer and a chauffeur and a banker. And a banker, well, yeah, Mom, can I have some money? Absolutely. And a referee, or sometimes a bouncer if one of us had to be thrown to another room to keep us from fighting from the other ones. Her hands work, her mouth speaks, and her heart loves. Verse 26, she speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. John Wesley, famous preacher, was at Oxford University. He was shocked by the amount of drinking done by some students. To have that in writing sounds kind of funny, especially as rampant as that runs now. So he wrote his mother, and her name is Susanna, and he wrote her for counsel. Mom, I cannot believe all this stuff is going on around me. And she wrote to him, my dear son, remember, anything that increases the authority of the body over the mind is an evil thing. Awesome instruction. From however far away she was, she hit the nail on the head. Or if you prefer a sports term, she knocked it out of the park. And I would love to have heard more words of wisdom from her. G. Campbell Morgan had 4 sons. He was a pastor. They all became pastors. So one time somebody wanted to get a rise out of one of the sons. So they said, hey, which Morgan do you think is the greatest preacher? And he looked straight over at his father and he said, my mother. And it left the asker of the question astonished. But all 4 of the sons and the father knew that to be the truth. She was the great instructor of her household. She supported them in what they did, and she upheld them when they needed it. Her mouth speaks. Do you remember some sayings from your mother? Don't talk with food in your mouth. My favorite one to tell my kids when they were little. Don't point at your brain. Don't put your elbows on the table. Don't talk with food in your mouth. If you don't like it, you can go hungry. My grandmother, if you stick your lip out like that, a bird's going to come along and poop on it. And I used to say, how's that going to happen? We're indoors. She said, it'll happen. Or if you make that face, it's going to freeze like that. If you fall out of the tree and break both legs, don't run crying to me. But there were also some others, such as, if I tell you again to pick up your clothes, I'm going to say it with a spanking. Yes, she speaks. You remember the old commercials, when E.F. Hutton talks, everybody listens? Mm-hmm. I imagine his mother pulled some weight in that family too. What Mom said, or what Mom threatened, was for our own good. Why? She's our mother. She's not our best buddy. She's not our friend. She's not our hangout pal. She's our mother. And a mother's job, and a father's, is to train us up in the way we should go. Mom wasn't there to make sure we were happy. Mom was there to make sure we were cared for, taken care of, and content. Well, you just said happy. Happy is different than content. I may not be happy that I had to have meatloaf, but my tummy's content that I did eat it instead of going hungry. Verse 26, she speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. Her heart loves. Not she loves, her heart loves. Verse 11 and 12, her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. If a man has confidence in his wife, he carries himself differently because he knows that whatever happens through life, through thick and through thin, through better or for worse, she's got his back. There have been times that I have walked in the door and one of the kids is getting in trouble and they look to me for help, and I've said, you listen to who is talking to you right now, and then when it's my turn, I'll get some in. I back her play. There have also been times that I have said something to the children, or she said something to the children, and one of us have pulled the other one aside and say, you know what, I think you were wrong. Not in front of the kids. It's not that we don't want our children to know that we are wrong, but we don't want our children to see the differences of opinion, or we don't want them to see that we may not quite be on the same page, because sometimes they can use that inadvertently or purposefully to put the parents at a disadvantage. But she's taken me aside and she says, no, you're wrong. Seriously? No. In all seriousness, you're wrong. They did this and you did this, and that is wrong, and here are the reasons. You're absolutely right. I've gone out and I've apologized to my children and said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Your mother had the wisdom to point out to me what was wrong. What you did was wrong, but the way I responded to it was also wrong. And these are the reasons why. And there have been also times that I have gone to her and say, that's incorrect. You are sending them to the electric chair for a misdemeanor. I take her aside and we talk. And I am thankful that we can talk to each other calmly more often than not. No knockdown drag-outs. But her heart loves. A man is confident because he knows that his wife loves him, puts her trust and faith in him. A husband of 60 years after his wife passed away put on the tombstone, she made a home happy. Do we see that often enough nowadays? A happy home? Well, being as I am in the position I am in, I'm going to say because there's not enough God or Christ in the home. That's also part of it. Sometimes there's too much of my attitude in the home, or there's too much of somebody else's attitude in the home, or there's too much of kids having authority that don't have any or should not have any in the home. There are too many things that sow discord. I'm not a walking thesaurus today. Too many things that sow discord in the home. The world batters us from every side. The home should be a safe haven and a refuge from the world outside, not a place to condense it down and stew it up even more. Part of a father's job, more so a mother's job, is to take those things that attack us and push them back to the door. To take those things that have climbed up and piled against us while we're out and about in the world, and to be able to help us push them away and get rid of them and give them up when we are inside. She's the keeper of the castle. Man's home is his castle. Yes, and she's the keeper of it. Any good man knows that. I'd like to finish with another poem or rhyme, if you will. Mothers are blowers of noses and washers of ears, smoothers of bump spots and wipers of tears, scrubbers of dishes and wielders of mops, grandmas for dollies and winders of tops, bathers of babies and umpires of spats, finders of rubbers, boots, mittens and hats, helpers with lessons and makers of beds, shakers of dust cloths and combers of heads, button sew honors and winders of clocks, menders of dresses and darners of socks, tellers of stories and readers of books, judges and juries of conduct and looks, doctors for heartaches and hearers for prayers, generals directing all family affairs, tenders of home fires and builders of men. Oh, for the gift of an adequate pen. I could talk until this time next week, and you know it's true, and still could not come up with anything that I felt that would remotely do the justice to the honor of the position of a mother. But I can say, may God richly bless you and thank you for tirelessly doing the job that was bestowed upon you, and for making a blessing out of each day in your struggles to keep your family in order.